Let's talk about Elrond. Elrond is one of my favorite blockchain projects and probably one of the best investments I've made, actually. So, Elrond is a layer one, it's a proof of stake blockchain that uses sharding to be scalable. And it's pretty similar to what Ethereum 2 will be, except that it exists right now. I first met the Elrond team at a DevCon. I think it was a few years ago, and they seemed like a really knowledgeable group of guys and really friendly too. And I left with a good impression after talking to them. To be honest, I didn't follow everything that they were explaining to me regarding the technicalities of it, but they were really friendly and really nice, and they seemed pretty down to earth as well. And so I decided to keep an eye on what the project was up to. So back then, the website really didn't have a lot of this. It was just more about the principles that they were building upon, which was sharding and working on just speeding up various aspects of the whole blockchain architecture. But then in 2019, they did a IEO with Binance, and that's when I got interested. I took part in the IEO. I didn't hold the tokens for long. I think I sold them soon after for a very small profit. But then a few months later, I was looking back at their website and they'd made some progress. And they announced that they'd be launching pre-staking. So for people who own the tokens who wanted to earn staking rewards before the actual mainnet launched, they would deploy a smart contract onto the Ethereum blockchain, and you would be able to deposit your tokens there and earn rewards right from that time onwards. So at that time, I decided to make a big bet on Elrond because looking through the documentation, looking at what they were working on, I realized that this was a really smart group of people, nice group of people who were trying to solve the biggest problems in scaling a blockchain, and they were making good progress with it. So I bought a big bag of ERD at the time, as it was called, got into pre-staking, and I even ended up setting up a node to become one of the validators on the mainnet, and I'm still running a mainnet validator node. Alongside that, I've done a bit of development work, just working with the tools they've provided, contributed some things to the community. So I've been into Elrond a bit more than I have into other projects that I've invested in. And it's because I actually believe that they have a good chance of building a blockchain that's truly scalable, cost effective, and useful to the world, basically. So in this video, I just want to talk a bit more about why I think that's the case. So the first things first, Elrond is, like I said, a sharded blockchain, and it pretty much does what Ethereum 2 plans to do. So quick overview of sharding. So right now, Ethereum is just a single blockchain, and part of the reason for the performance issues is that there's congestion on the chain. There's just so much activity happening, and there just isn't enough bandwidth to cater for all the transactions. So right now, Ethereum does 20 transactions per second max, Bitcoin does 7 max. So the thing with what sharding is splitting up the blockchain into multiple subsections. And the point is that the validators who are validating a particular subsection only need to care about their subsection. So in this diagram, you've got, say, shard 1, shard 64. So in Ethereum 2, they plan to have 64 shards, and each shard is independent of the other shard. The contracts on this shard only exist on this shard, not on this shard. The transactions on this shard only exist on this shard and not on this shard, and so on. So effectively, it's a way of overcoming performance limitations by dividing up the work amongst smaller groups of people. Of course, the trickiness with this is when you want to send a message from, say, this shard to this shard, it has to go there, and it has to be atomic, and it has to be verifiable and have all the other properties that we associate with blockchain transactions. And that's where the beacon chain comes in. So the beacon chain is effectively there to ensure or enable this cross-shard communication and to verify that communication is accurate and no fraud took place. And this is probably the most complicated shard in any sharded blockchain, and it's also the one which would hold back scalability. So what I mean by that is it doesn't matter how many shards you have, because they all have to communicate through the beacon chain. Ultimately, if this becomes congested, then you'll have hit your limit in terms of how scalable your blockchain is. So you can kind of imagine, if you were to think this through all the way, why don't we just make the beacon chain sharded as well? And then you'd have sort of this recursive sharded blockchain. But anyway, that's a thought for another day. But effectively, all the sharded chains work in this way. You have a beacon chain, which is, I guess, like a coordinating chain, and then all the shards talk to each other through the beacon chain. And this is what Ethereum 2 plans to have, and it's what Elrond already has today. Pretty much almost done. There's still a couple of elements they need to put in, but it's almost there. And that was one of the first things that made me realize that Elrond is good to go, in that if the Ethereum development team have decided upon this as their solution for scaling, and they've got some really smart people working there, and the Elrond guys have the same idea, then to me, the Elrond guys are on the right track. Before I go any further, I just want to quickly talk about Polkadots and blockchain projects like Polkadot, such as Cosmos. So Polkadot and Cosmos also use, I guess you could say, a sharded sort of architecture, but they're a little different in that in Polkadot, the shards, they're known as parachains, they don't actually have to be the same as each other in terms of their architecture. So shards can have, and indeed they do have, their own native currencies. They can even function a little differently in terms of their execution engines, in terms of whether they even support smart contracts. And just like in a normal sharded blockchain architecture, parachains do communicate through a central chain. In this case, it's known as a relay chain. But that is a fundamental difference between something like, say, Polkadot and a sharded blockchain like Elrond. And just a sort of a side note here, it's an interesting approach, because in something like Elrond and Ethereum 2.0, the native currency, so in Elrond's case, it's EGLD. EGLD is used in all of the shards. All of the transfers require payment in EGLD, and EGLD is used to secure the network in terms of the rewards that the validators earn, and it's also what they would stake in the first place in order to become validators. Whereas in Polkadot, that's not really how the native currency DOT works. So the native currency DOT really has three uses. So one is for staking for the validators who secure the chain. The other is for bonding, and that's for when you want to send assets from one parachain to another, you have to bond DOT, and this side also has to bond DOT, and that's what effectively keeps you honest in sending and receiving assets. And the third use case is governance. So in Polkadot, updates to the chain, to the architecture of the network, are actually voted upon by DOT token holders. And so it's important to remember that fundamental difference between something like, say, Polkadot, which is what I would call a heterogeneous sharded architecture, versus something like Elrond, which is homogeneous sharded architecture. So in the former, the shards can be all completely different from each other and have their own native currencies. In the latter, like Elrond and Ethereum 2.0, the shards are all exactly the same as each other, and they all use the exact same currency. Some of the more general points of Elrond. So we've seen that it's scalable, it's developer friendly, it's using the WASM virtual machine WebAssembly. Most of the latest blockchains use this. Solana is using WebAssembly, Near uses WebAssembly, ETH 2.0 will use WebAssembly. So that's pretty standard, but it still is good to see that there, because it means multiple languages will be able to be supported. Although at the moment the SDK uses Rust. I've had a go with it. It's pretty good. It was a bit of a learning curve for me coming from Solidity smart contract programming, but actually it's pretty good and it's fairly robust. The staking, this is really good. So one of the things that I think is really good about Elrond is that the staking rewards are in effect guaranteed once you're in the staking queue. So this is actually a pretty old blog post, and this is when pre-staking was enabled. So you can see here, delegators get 25% APR until Genesis and 29% once mainnet is live. And validators get 25%, 36% once mainnet is live. So validators are people who actually run nodes to secure the network, and delegators are people who are delegating their EGLD to the validators. And that's why they get a lower reward. The remaining 7% goes to the validator. And what I like about this and what I like about their staking is this reward is fixed. So it doesn't matter how many people or how much money is going in, everyone gets the reward. And the way they've done that basically is by capping it. So there's a limit to the number of people they took in, which is why I say it didn't matter how many went in, because it was capped. And what's good about that is, if you compare this to other DeFi platforms where you can earn a yield, let's say Compound or Aave, or even as an LP in Uniswap. So the yield depends on how much capital has been staked. So if a yield farm opens up and it's got an APR of, I don't know, say 150%, so that attracts a lot of people to it. And basically in a very short period of time, the yield goes down because so much capital has now come in. But because Elrond capped the amount of capital that could go in, it basically meant it could guarantee this yield for everybody. And that's why it's a very attractive staking program. And so right now, because the mainnet's been live since July, everyone is getting at least 29% on their staked EGLD. And very few people are leaving. Even when it gets added to new exchanges, very few people are unstaking and leaving because this APR is just so good. And there's actually a queue of people wanting to get in, such that they created a staking queue. So you can actually queue your EGLD to be staked or delegated. And whilst you're in the queue, you earn an APR. It's not listed on this page, but if you check out their latest blog post, it talks about that. And they weren't originally planning to do that queue. They just did it because there was so much demand for people who wanted to earn staking yield. So this is a really, really cool thing. And it's a sign that they take the economics of the coin seriously, and they've really thought about it. Speaking of the coin in general, so ERD was the name of the currency originally, and they renamed it to EGLD back in, I think it was August last year. And they also redenominated it. So originally the max supply, I think it was around 30 something billion, and they effectively divided it by 1,000 so that it's 30 million. I think they did this just so that it feels similar to Bitcoin, and also because it meant that the price was $20 at the time instead of, I think, what was it, 22 cents? Yeah, and I think they did it they didn't say this, but I'm pretty sure they did it because it made it similar to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's only got 21 million coins in total, and EGLD is going to have 31 million max, so it's easier to compare the two, and therefore it's easier to compare the prices of the two. So if EGLD, which at that time was, I think, $20, and Bitcoin was in the thousands, I guess it's their way of saying, look, this is what is possible if this really takes off. I think the name was also good, EGLD, electronic gold. It just makes sense. And so this is just talking about the issuance. So it's a deflationary currency. After 10 years, there won't be any more EGLD issued. So inflation in the first year is at 10.8%, and it just sort of decreases over time. And the idea is that if the number of transactions increases, as the number of transactions increases, the validator rewards can decrease. But even if that doesn't happen, the rewards will decrease over time. So eventually it will hit its cap. But if the transactions increase at a greater rate than they're planning, then EGLD wouldn't even actually hit the 31 million cap. It would actually be capped at a lower level. So they've designed these economics specifically to ensure that EGLD has a deflationary pressure attached to it, which I think is good for the economics of the token. And this just kind of illustrates more of that, and just more charts about that. And they talk about the properties of the money. So a lot of their pitch is around how Elrond can be transformational for the world at large. And when they talk about Elrond at a high level, they always talk about the three things. The first thing, for any sort of blockchain to be transformational, or any sort of financial system to be transformational, is you need a very scalable blockchain, and that's the Elrond blockchain. The second thing is you need economics that make sense, and that's what EGLD is meant to be. And the third thing you need is an application or a user interface that allows people to very easily access it and use it. And that's where the Meyer Wallet comes in. So this is the Meyer Wallet. It's a mobile app that got released in January, and it's pretty simple. It allows you to buy EGLD, it allows you to transfer EGLD, and at the moment, that's pretty much it. It's got a bunch of gamification features inside it to encourage you to do more, to buy more, to send more, to add more people as friends. Oh, you can also register what they call a hero tag. It's basically a username that's globally unique on the Elrond network against your address. Interesting, when I got the app and I signed up, I noticed that a lot of people had already registered things like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, the Red Cross. People are just squatting on all these names, but it's what you'd expect. I'm not going to talk too much about the app itself. You can just grab it from the app stores. I think that the app, to be honest, is a little bit complex for non-crypto users. That would be my opinion, because it still feels a bit too crypto-y. But I think it's a step in the right direction for Elrond because I think it's a very interesting I think it's interesting from a strategic point of view compared to what a lot of other blockchains are doing. So Elrond is specifically trying to crack the non-crypto market, and their thesis is that the way to do that is to build a really user-friendly application that abstracts away as much of the blockchain as possible. And that does make a lot of sense to me. In their latest roadmap, they've got this module they talk about called DeFi 2.0. So right now, Elrond just has staking rewards, and you can transfer your EGLD. You can deploy contracts to the mainnet, and I know that their native token standard, ESDT, is going to be out in the next upgrade, although you can already use it on the testnet, and yeah, it works quite well. But this is the thing that's really interesting to me. So this is how they think of the layers. So Elrond network, you've got the currency that works on top of it. You've got ESDT, which is Elrond's ERC20 tokens, but much better. NFT, stablecoins, custom tokens, the Elrond Launchpad, I'm not sure what that is. Elrond Swap, Elrond Lending, so an AMM, a lending protocol, synthetics protocol, like synthetics, bridges to connect to other blockchains like Ethereum, and then the Meyer Wallet, and then usable by all of these entities. So the way they're seeing it is that all of these things build on top of these layers, and then at the end is Meyer. So this is what you wouldn't normally see with another blockchain project. I mean, most blockchain projects like Ethereum, I mean, there are AMMs and protocols, and these are all on different websites, and you go there and you interact with them with your wallet through maybe MetaMask. But Elrond, as well as doing that, they actually want to try and get all of these exposed through a single interface in the Meyer Wallet. And this is really their project plan, and this is their gamble to see if they can make this work and get people to be able to use all of these, let's say, complicated financial instruments through a really simple interface. And I think going forward, the long-term value of Elrond, at least at this point, is predicated on whether they can make this successful. I do remember actually now what the Launchpad was. So I think the Launchpad is just I think it says in here, it's just a way for third parties to come and get funding and launch their projects onto the Elrond network and become part of the ecosystem. And I know that a lot of these portions are being contributed by third parties. So they're actually partnering, I think, with ZeroSwap for the AMM. I know they're partnering with Orion for a matching market trading system. So a lot of these they're not being built by the Elrond team. They're actually being built by other projects who want to partner with Elrond, which is really good to see. I think partnerships are really the way to do these things. One of the other things that I think is really great about Elrond is the work ethic. So this is CoinGecko, where I'm looking at the list sorted by developer activity, so commits on GitHub basically, as well as a few other stats. And I mean, right now they're third behind Bitcoin and Solana, but oftentimes they've been at the top just with the amount of commit activity that's been going on. Now, obviously, you can just do lots and lots of really small commits, so it doesn't really say much to say lots of commits have gone through. Having said that, them being consistently in the top 3 or even top 2 is just an indicator of how hard and how quickly they work at implementing new things. And I remember even on Christmas Day, these guys are still coding and responding to people in the Telegram chat. And they're very helpful in the chat as well, by the way, I have to say. So I commend the team for being responsive in the chat despite all the hard work they're doing. And that's one of the things that gives me a lot of confidence about this project in general, because even if, let's say, the Meyer wallet doesn't work out, I know that they will very quickly start working on the things or other things that could help them succeed more. And in a way, you could take this team of developers and ask them to build something else, and they would go at it rapid fire and just get the job done. And that's, I think, a really important thing for any startup, any tech startup, or any business in general to be able to do, is that ability to build things at speed, the ability for the team to work together. And it really shows in how quickly they've been able to roll things out. And it's another reason why I'm confident that it's going to keep growing and getting better in future. One more thing that's really exciting and that's coming up pretty soon is the phase 3 of staking. So right now, as I said, they've capped the number of people who can stake. They've capped the number of validators as well as the amount that can be delegated, because all delegation right now goes to the Elrond team's own nodes. But they're about to increase the number of validators, as it says here. They're going to be staking pools. And staking will be available through Meyer. So a lot of changes are going to happen. The waiting list API is, I think that's going to be a decrease. I think it was at 8% right now. Yeah, so once staking pools are enabled, we don't really need to give a waiting list API for people waiting to stake because they won't need to wait anymore. They'll just be able to stake in a pool. This is, I think, is going to be huge because right now, around 55% of EGLD circulating supply is being staked. We can actually see that here. The circulating supply, 17 million, stake supply 9 million. So I would expect once phase 3 launches for this number to go up, because I think the reason it's only at this point is because there's a limit on how much can be staked right now. I think marketing is definitely one of their strong points. I mean, some people think it's a bit lame that they seem to have an announcement every single day, but I think it's one of the things that's helped them stay in the limelight longer than they otherwise might have. So right now they have this thing called Hypergrowth100 going, this hashtag, and it basically just means they're going to make an announcement every day for the next 100 days. But to be honest, even if they didn't have that, even on a non-hypergrowth period, they make announcements so regularly, at least once a week, sometimes several times a week. And they've just been constantly doing this. Sometimes they're repeating what they've said before, but it's in a new way, or maybe there's an update to that piece. Oftentimes it's announcement of new partnerships. Sometimes it's just talking about the staking you can do, or Binance Savings is opening up. I mean, this has been done many, many, many times. And they just keep going like this at this cadence. And I think it does actually help to keep bringing more awareness to the project. So I guess the final thing to look at is price. So if we look at EGLD, the chart, I mean, back from when it started, can I get back there? Here we go. Oh, quiet. As it keeps it. Oh, wait, let me zoom out. Here we go. Zoom out more. November 9.5. I mean, it was down at $6, I think in October, and now it's at, where are we at? I think 150 something. Yeah. So it's gone on this wild ride. I mean, all crypto went up end of December and through January. So this doesn't surprise me that it went up, but it went up by quite an amount. 51 to 204x. Yeah. And to say it was at 6 in October, it's crazy. So if you bought in then, I mean, you made 10, 30 times what you put in. But anyway, it seems to have settled around the 150 mark now. I think given the changes that are coming down the line, phase 3 staking, the launch of the DeFi module, I think it's sort of a month and a half away, sometime in May, I think it's going to go up. I think there's going to be more liquidity on the network. There's going to be more demand for EGLD for people to get that staking reward. And I think they're just going to push the marketing again. And once they've launched that, the DeFi module will have stable coins. I think there'll be custom tokens, which will enable more things to happen. And once the bridge exists, the bridge from, say, Ethereum to Elrond and other chains to Elrond, I think it just makes it easier for assets to move around. So I think I'm fairly confident this price is going to go up, especially since it's been at sort of 215, maybe at 220 even, yeah, before. I'm pretty confident it can hit that point again. I think it can go beyond that, but I can't say what timescale that would be. But I would say in the medium term, so within the next sort of 3 months, I would expect it to breach the 200 barrier again. So we're looking at a 25%, roughly 25% increase just there. I think Elrond, in terms of market cap, is only at 2.6 billion. To me, it's easily worth 10 billion when I compare it to some of the other coins on the list and where those projects are in terms of their evolution and what they've produced. I think, yeah, easily 10 billion. So over the long term, I'd expect it to quadruple. But of course, that's assuming that everything goes well, that Meyer really is successful as a mobile app, that all the DeFi modules work properly, that liquidity comes to the platform, and that something innovative happens. So we'll see. So 10 billion in the long term in terms of market cap. In the short term, I'm looking for at least 25%, get it back over the $200 mark. And so I'm going to be holding my bags and I'm going to keep collecting those staking rewards.